Welcome, everyone. Today we have a real treat in store for you. Chris Mackowski of Emerging Civil War fame. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Mike, delighted to be here. Thank you very much. You make me sound more august than I really am.
I didn't know that you were august, but you are one of the most prolific Civil War guys on the planet. But most of us don't know a heck of a lot about you. So where did you grow up and where'd you go to school?
Yeah, it's all part of my intentional effort to be an international man of mystery. I don't know how well that's working out so far. I actually had the benefit of growing up all over the place as a kid. My parents actually divorced when I was young, so a lot of back and forth between parents and that kind of thing. Most of my childhood was spent in Hershey, Pennsylvania. So I had a childhood that smelled like chocolate. It was wonderful. And of course, down the road is Gettysburg National Military Park. So every year we'd pile on the big yellow school buses and get down there and crawl around Devil's Den or, crawl around on the cannons and those sorts of things. Didn't make a particularly big impact on me as something that inspired my later work, but it was a cool place to go and visit. It was one of those places that had a lot of wonder. So, years later, I would come back to that. And then, I've lived in Maine, I've lived in Vermont, out in Central Illinois. So I've had the chance in Northwestern Pennsylvania. So I've had the chance to see a lot of cool places and meet a lot of cool people.
Very neat. So you teach American history at St. Bonaventure University, right?
Actually, a lot of people assume that. I'm a writing professor in the School of Communication. I actually was hired when we were still a school of journalism. I teach writing to students who want to become writers in various capacities. So it's a great environment for me to be in. As a writer, and this speaks to your comment about the prolificness of my work, as a writer, I can't not write. John Lee Hooker, the great blues guitarist, said that about his music. Someone said, "Why do you play?" And he says, "It's in me and it gots to get out." And for me, writing is the same sort of thing. And so I happen to write about history. I tell my students, as a writer, you can write about whatever you're curious about, whatever happens to spark your interest and your passion, whatever you're excited about at the moment. And so for me, that's just been American history and particularly Civil War history. The Civil War is America's great story, and I'm attracted to great stories. And so that's kind of how I slid into it sideways.
So wait a minute. Journalism, strategic communications, sports media, broadcast journalism, but you're a Civil War guy, right? And you need to explain yourself.
Usually when my wife says that, I get worried. You need to explain yourself. Yeah, it's kind of a cool story in that my daughter, who is now 26, when she was 4, we went to Manassas National Battlefield one day. We were in DC for a few days visiting my in-laws and my brother-in-law at the time. And we had done the museums and the monuments, and we had a morning to kill, and we were going to go to the zoo in the afternoon. So looking at the map, I thought, this Manassas battlefield, close enough. We can let Stephanie go, run around, blow off some steam, and then we'll go to the zoo this afternoon. So I didn't have any particular interest in the Civil War other than it was a place that my daughter could go blow off some steam at the battlefield. So we get out there and we get out of the car. And for those of you who've been to Manassas, there's this giant statue of Stonewall Jackson that's right out in the middle of the battlefield. It's a big lightning rod. It's Stonewall on steroids is kind of a common name for it. I've always likened it to Arnold Schwarzenegger on one of the Budweiser Clydesdales. And of course, anybody who knows anything about Stonewall Jackson, no, that's not what he looked like at all. But we get out of the car, my daughter sees it and she falls in love. She's like, "Oh my gosh." And she sprints across the field to go see the statue. And, and then finds out he's got a cool nickname, Stonewall. Oh my gosh. Well, so, she just became instantly enamored. And we went inside and she had to ask the Rangers all about this Stonewall Jackson guy. And then she starts asking me a whole bunch of questions, and I figure, I'll do my best to answer. And it became really complicated really quickly when she's talking about good guys and bad guys versus blue guys and gray guys, which is how I tried to rephrase the discussion for her. Remember, she's 4. We're not having any complicated discussions about the start and causes of the war or anything like that, right? So we're talking about the blue guys, the gray guys, and Stonewall Jackson. And I figured she's going to have a bunch of questions about panda bears this afternoon because we're going to the zoo. And indeed she did, but she kept coming back later on the trip and on the way home asking more about this Stonewall Jackson guy. So that became what has become a lifelong fascination with Stonewall Jackson for both she and I. I readily admit I'm a Stonewall Jackson fanboy. She's a Stonewall Jackson fangirl. He's no one I would want to hang out with, but he's someone that I've come to admire. And particularly in these complicated times where folks tend to be brushing with broad strokes and making generalizations, a character like Stonewall Jackson provides a really good opportunity to have a sophisticated, subtle discussion about virtues and pluses and minuses and the humanity of these people that so often get elevated to Arnold Schwarzenegger-like status. So it's really been a wonderful way into the war for me.
That's a great story. So you write a blog, and you've written what, 2,000 to 3,000 books or so, Speedy, and you're the editor-in-chief of the emerging Civil War. And I'm told that you have written some plays.
Oh yeah, actually, my MFA is in playwriting, and I did a lot with nonprofit arts groups back in what seemed like a former life, and did a lot of community theater stuff. And so I really thought kind of my writing and my theater work kind of came together in that way. As it turns out, other aspects of my writing career took off instead, particularly the history writing. I also used to do a fair amount of travel writing and nature writing, but the history writing just took off. And so that's where I have consistently funneled my energies, because like a jet engine, the faster it goes, the faster it goes.
So have any of the plays hit the stage?
Yeah, actually, I had a number of them that were produced on the community theater level. I got to the point in that part of my writing career that if I was going to be more serious about it, I had to move out of northwestern Pennsylvania. At the time, I was working at one of the branch campuses for the University of Pittsburgh in Bradford, Pennsylvania, home of Zippo Lighters, and was doing a lot of stuff in the state and community levels. Was on the board of directors for the Eastern States Theater Association, but I really kind of needed to go someplace with a professional theater scene if I was going to take that to the next level. But a couple of my plays did win statewide playwriting awards and went on to state festivals and things like that.
Wow! So how many Olympic gold medals have you won?
None, but I'm a writer, so I could write a story about winning one. That's about as close as I'm going to get.
There we go. So let's get down to it. Now, tell us about Emerging Civil War. What is it? How many writers are involved? And what does it take to get into that fold?
Oh, that's a great question, because we're actually in the process now of getting ready to see about doing some more recruiting. One of our central missions is to provide a platform for emerging voices in the field. And so we are looking for new talent all the time, trying to provide a venue for people to get their first couple writing credits as they're developing their resumes. You've got to pay your dues first, and we really look at ourselves as an opportunity to help writers get those first few publication credits with a credible organization that then helps them build up their name brand recognition, so that if they were to then make a pitch to, say, America's Civil War or Civil War Times, those editors read our blogs and they'd be able to say, like, oh yeah, well, we saw your work there, send us something. And that's a much easier sell to have that door open for you than if you're trying to make a cold call and those editors don't know who you are. So that's kind of how we've always positioned ourselves, as that open door that can then open other doors as people build up their writing credentials. We actually got started 9 years ago this summer, this month actually. Chris White, who is an education manager at the American Battlefield Trust, he and I had been working together at Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania National Military Park, where I had been a volunteer. He had been a seasonal park ranger. A third colleague, Jake Struhelka, was one of the staff historians there. And we were sitting on the porch at the caretaker's house down at the Jackson Shrine, where Jake lived at the time, and it was still called the Jackson Shrine at the time. It's now called the Stonewall Jackson Death Site. We're sitting on the back porch, and Chris and I are smoking cigars and having some beers. Jake's having some cream sodas, and we're like, oh, we should start up a blog and get some people whose work we really believe in to join us and make it sort of a community writing event. And we sort of built this community of writers from there. Since then, we've added a book series with Savis Beatty. Ted Savis has just been fantastic to us. He's giving us complete creative control over the books that we produce. We have 37 books that we have done in the last, I think 2012 was the year the first one came out. And we've since had a second book series that we've added with Southern Illinois University Press called Engaging the Civil War. That's more academic. The Emerging Civil War series with Savis Beatty is intro level. We like to call them gateway drugs. It's the first book that someone might read on a topic. It gets them hooked, and then they read something more in depth. And those books really came out from, Chris and Jake and I working at the parks where people would go on a battlefield tour, and it's the first time they've been there, and like, oh, wow, this is really cool. I wish I could pick up something to read a little bit more about this. And they typically don't want one of those thick, $30 or $40 books. So we came up with something that was $15. You could read it in a couple hours, lots of pictures, lots of maps, reader-friendly text, really focused on story, broad overview. And then hopefully from there, people are interested enough that they will then go on to something more in depth. So that's kind of where that book series came from. We have, over the course of the years, had writers come and go, join us, stay with us for a while, move on to other things. Right now, we've got about 30 historians working with us in different capacities. Some of them are very regular contributors on the blog. Some of them are working behind the scenes with social media. Some of them help with our academic series with Southern Illinois University Press. They've been really a great press to work with. They're a little smaller than maybe, like, for instance, UNC, which I think has also made them hungrier. So they've just been fantastic to work with. So yeah, that's things have just sort of spread out from there. We've got an annual symposium. It would be this very week, but because of COVID, we had to postpone it to next year. So we're doing a virtual symposium. One of the great things about being a digital brand is that there are so many things we can do with digital technology that traditional Civil War organizations can't. And so the virtual symposium is an example of that. Ties right in with our digital base online at emergingcivilwar.com. Another example, I know this is a long answer to your question, Mike. Another example is in our Engaging the Civil War series with Southern Illinois University Press. Each book has a QR code in it, and you can scan that with your phone or with a scanner on your computer, and it will take you to special pages on our website that has exclusive digital content. So we extend the conversation from the book into the digital space, which then kind of frees us from space constraints of original book, and allows us to have all kinds of extra supplementary material, extra resources, extra stories, and really extend that conversation. So the digital space has really been a wonderful place for us to occupy.
Wow, that's neat. So the digital space do include videos?
We do. We have maybe over the past year been trying slowly to expand our YouTube presence as well. And that's turned out to be kind of a better platform for the video stuff. We do have some video that's actually embedded in our website as well, but that all kind of ties back. We try to do as much cross-pollination as possible. So if something goes up on the YouTube page, we'll mention it on our blog and vice versa, so that we're really kind of directing people through all these different digital platforms that we have available. Facebook and Twitter being two others that we're using, growing our Instagram presence as well. So I really try to do a full court press with social media and digital media.
Wow. So is ECW a membership organization? You collect annual dues and make promises?
We don't, actually. We did just finally officially organize as a 501c3. We've operated like one for years and years. It's just three idiots sitting on a porch drinking beer, smoking cigars. So, when we got started, we weren't necessarily thinking like, oh, we really need to think about bylaws. And so, we have, as we've grown, tried to formalize structures and organizational procedures and things like that. Nobody cared. You get into this because you love history, not because you like to write bylaws, as you know yourself, right? We have kind of very holistically grown in that way. So we are officially a nonprofit organization, but we don't like to do fundraising because we think that puts us in competition with a lot of groups that we partner with. We've got great relationships with everyone from the American Battlefield Trust, Central Virginia Battlefield Trust, Civil War Roundtable Congress, Civil War Trails. And these are all organizations that really depend on fundraising dollars. And by wading into that pool, we might be taking away resources from organizations that we really respect and admire and work with. So we're not getting into that ballgame, but hopefully it will, it just sends a signal to people that, we're not out trying to make a buck off the Civil War. We are very serious about our educational mission and very committed to that.
So you've been holding annual conferences at Stevenson Ridge in Spotsylvania. Now, tell us about those conferences.
So this would have been our 7th annual Emerging Civil War Symposium at Stevenson Ridge. Stevenson Ridge is a historic property located on the Spotsylvania battlefield that I happened to marry into, which was a pretty cool coincidence. A number of years ago, I was a speaker at a symposium that they were holding, and started talking with the event coordinator who was running the event, and we hit it off and ended up getting married. And lo and behold, it's 90 acres of the Spotsylvania courthouse battlefield. So I married into my own earthworks. Fantastic. I tell my wife I love her for more than her earthworks, though. It's where Ambrose Burnside was located with the 9th Corps for the first week of the battle. That's why nobody ever cares about it. It's Ambrose Burnside. Who cares about Burnside, right? But being a historic property on the battlefield, there were some great opportunities to really build on the Civil War history of the property. So Emerging Civil War started having an annual symposium there. And it's something we've done every August. We have, for instance, this year, Gordon Ray was going to be our speaker. He's coming back next year. Scott Hartwig has been a keynote speaker. Will Green has been a keynote speaker. Eric Wittenberg. So we've really had some great talent come in and help us out. And then usually there are 10 people on the program, all of them coming from the ECW community of writers. So it's a chance for us to share our scholarship, us to show off. C-SPAN has covered this since our 2nd year with the virtual symposium that we're going to be doing this month. C-SPAN is coming to record that as well. That's something I'm really especially proud of, that we have been able to produce a product that is high enough quality that C-SPAN has us on their calendar every year, and they come and they make sure that they film what we're doing. And we don't mind giving away that content, because when you come to one of our symposia, it's really the chance to meet folks and mingle, that sense of community. It's always been really important to us. We do a lot of cigar smoking and beer drinking and refighting the war. I think that's really what history is all about. And we do that with the people who come to the symposium, and people talk about how accessible we are and what a great sense of camaraderie there is. And for me, that's what the symposium is really all about, plus the cool history that we get to talk about. So a little disappointed that we're not able to do that live this year, but certainly safety is the most important consideration here. So just as a way to say thank you to all of our supporters, we're doing this virtual conference, and then we'll have the same lineup for next year.
Wow, that's great. I had a super time last year at the symposium and met some.
When you came out and enjoyed some bourbon with us and some cigars, and you're like, dude, your friends are crazy,
Yeah, and there was some music and some singing. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, so I was talking with Ted Savas not too long ago, and he said that you pitched the idea of your book series several years ago with him. And how was that experience?
I tell you, Ted, I just think the world of Ted. He's become a close friend as well as a business partner. Chris and I had been doing a couple small books for Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania National Military Park. We had been working with another publisher who was handling that. That publisher was, I'm not going to name names, but did not have the best business practices or the most ethical business practices. So Chris and I thought, where are we going to take our product elsewhere? At that time, he and I had already been working with Ted for our first hardcover called Chancellorsville's Forgotten Front, which was about Second Fredericksburg and Salem Church. And so Ted knew who we were. He'd been working with us on this first book. He knew the blog, was an early follower of the blog, really was impressed with what we were doing. So Chris called him up and said, look, we've got this book on Fredericksburg, and would you be interested in publishing this book? And from there, the idea of this book series caught on. And Chris and I did the first couple because we had all these different projects in the works, but it was really important for us to then help nurture some of our new colleagues so that they could get books of their own too. And to me, that's one of the things I'm most proud about with the Emerging Civil War series is there are a lot of first-time authors or first-time book authors as part of that series who started writing for the blog and got their feet underneath them, got a couple magazine articles published, did an appendix or two for some of the early volumes, and then worked their way up to getting a book. And then some of them have gone on to then do hardcovers. And so again, keeping in mind with that whole central part of our mission to promote emerging writers, the Emerging Civil War series was really a way for us to help people get those first books.
Yeah, excellent. So do you serve as an intermediate editor for Savas Speedy, or how does that?
It's a unique relationship that most writers and editors don't ever get the pleasure to have, I guess. And I really call it a luxury, because when we showed something to Ted, he was just absolutely thrilled with it. We spent the first year working on titles and ideas, but he allowed us to do the layout for the books, choose all the photos, choose who was contributing. And basically, by the fourth book, which was Lee White's book on Chickamauga, he's like, you just go run the book series. You tell me what you need, I'll print them up for you. And to have that kind of confidence from Ted was just a huge thing for us. And really, I can't thank Ted enough, because he had that confidence, and we have tried to maintain a very high standard of quality so that we're not letting him down and we're not letting our readers down. And so basically my job is to make sure that everything that comes out with our imprint meets that level of quality.
Yeah, nice. So what does editor-in-chief of Emerging Civil War mean?
It's a fancy title with some hyphens. It makes me feel important. It's a fancy way of saying chief cook and bottle washer. Which I think is the same thing that President of Civil War Roundtable Congress means too, if I'm not mistaken. Chief cook and bottle washer, right? So it's basically my job as editor-in-chief is to maintain the brand quality, help people develop their projects. I would actually get much more writing done if I was just writing my own stuff, but a big chunk of my time is actually spent helping manage other people with their projects. Like right now, for instance, we have 9 books that are in various stages of development. Because of the COVID pandemic, Savas had to slow down its publication schedule. So it's sort of like a bunch of airplanes are circling O'Hare Airport waiting for clearance to land. And I'm, the air traffic controller, kind of keeping them all up and making sure that things are still happening. Working with writers to develop their manuscripts and, hey, just think about this. And, oh, there's a hole in your story there, or what about these sources? So, it's a real cool chance for me to grapple with history. And as a writer and editor, I've got a skill set that a lot of historians don't have. So that's kind of, I think, very advantageous for us as well.
So you essentially help in the sausage making, right?
Yeah, and nobody wants to see how the sausage is made, trust me. Just know that it tastes delicious when it gets
yeah. So I've watched some of your recent videos on the wilderness in Spotsylvania, and how is it that you come up with these ideas?
Part of it is just, you know, because I live on the edge of the Chancellorsville battlefield. Edward Porter Alexander had his artillery set up in what is now my front yard, contesting the advance of the 12th Corps. So, like, I'm literally living on the battlefield. My wife's family owns a quarter of the Spotsylvania battlefield. And these have been the battlefields that really through my whole professional life I have spent time on studying, giving tours on. I volunteered with the Park Service for 12 years and you know, worked for them as a seasonal. I've done contract work for them. So I've just become intimately familiar with these battlefields, and I am passionate about sharing their stories. And I'm always reading something new and finding some new account. And so it doesn't take a whole lot to find something new to go out and be excited about. And I am legitimately excited about these battlefields. I'll give a shout out to my mentors at the Park Service, Greg Mertz and Frank O'Reilly. When I started volunteering, my daughter was 11, and she is the one who actually started us volunteering, and I was along for the ride. And you know, what a great park to work in, because there's 18 months of the war from Fredericksburg through Spotsylvania, and you've got to know Antietam as kind of the lead up to Fredericksburg. And from Spotsy, you've got to be able to get down to North Anna and Cold Harbor to kind of carry the story onward. So, I mean, that's a huge chunk of the war, and it changes significantly over those 18 months. And it's not just the military scene, but it's the political and economic scene. The emancipation happens in the middle of that, which is, you know, a game changer. So you've got all these sorts of things. And even, like, you know, they leave Chancellorsville, which is the setup to Gettysburg. So you kind of got to know about Gettysburg because they leave and then come back to the park in the fall. So, you know, and Greg and Frank did so much to help me understand how valuable this park was, and how valuable my experience at this park was for understanding the war in a large scale by looking at what these four battlefields had to offer. And I can't thank them enough. You know, I got a first class education working with those two guys and the rest of the staff here. John Hennessy is a brilliant historian, is the chief of interpretation here, really is always pushing to expand people's ways of thinking. And so really, I could not have gotten a better history education anywhere than I got from these guys here.
Ah, that's neat. So this last year, you did a tour of North Anna. Where are you planning to go in 21?
To be honest, I'm not sure. North Anna is, you know, outside of the confines of these particular four battlefields, and Mine Run, I'll throw that in, so 5 battlefields. And I've always liked Mine Run, and I've always liked North Anna because they're overlooked in the grand scheme of things, because more because of what never happened at those places. But to me, they're fascinating components of the larger puzzle that shed a lot of light on what we do know. A lot of people think, for instance, oh, yeah, Gettysburg, and then we're going to jump right to the wilderness, and they forget all about the fall of '63. All kinds of cool, important stuff happened that changed the nature of both armies to set things up for the wilderness. So that's, you know, I really like to look at that. North Anna gets forgotten about because, you know, you've got the fiery flames of the wilderness and just the massive bloodletting at Spotsylvania, at the Muleshoe, and particularly Cold Harbor. Everybody thinks about those last fateful assaults that Grant said he always regretted thereafter. And North Anna kind of gets forgotten in the midst of all that. And yet, to me, that's the most fascinating part of the campaign because of all the missed opportunities. Lee and Grant are both just punch drunk. You talk about that war of attrition that Grant wants to wage, and you see it in the command structure. So, I mean, there's just all these really cool things to unpeel. So, you know, that's why I'm particularly in love with North Anna. The beginning of May shows up, and I spend time at Chancellorsville, and then the wilderness, and then Spotsylvania, and then North Anna. And I really try to spend time, quality time at all 4 of those battlefields at that time of year, because ultimately I think our responsibility as historians is to remember what happened. And because I devote so much of my professional career to the Overland Campaign particularly, but to the 4 and 5 battlefields in this area, it's important for me to go and be on the ground and remember those men and what they did for us as a country, what they continue to do for me as a historian. And so there's really an effort on my part to commemorate that for a lot of very personal reasons.
Yeah, nice. So with so much going on at ECW and teaching at the university, do you ever have time to spend with your family?
Family? What family? No. Yeah, I have two kids from my first marriage. Stephanie's 26 and just had she had a daughter in March, so I'm getting to be a grandfather for the first time, and I get to spend time on FaceTime with my granddaughter pretty much every day, which is nice. I have a 20-year-old son who's going off to his final year of college. Knock on wood, hoping that all goes well with Stanford. And then, of course, with my wife Jennifer, she and I have a 3-year-old Maxwell, and Maxwell goes up battlefield with me all the time. Let's go out and explore and stuff. I'm lucky that as a professor, I've got an extremely flexible schedule. I teach mostly online these days, and it's asynchronous, which means Monday morning I'll post a lesson, and students have 72 hours to figure it out, and then they go on to the next lesson. That gives me a lot of flexibility about when to read their assignments and do their grading and stuff like that too. So I actually have a tremendous amount of flexibility these days, which does give me lots of good family time.
Oh, that's great. So I've heard a whiff of a rumor that you have started Emerging Revolutionary War. Is that true?
It is true. Emerging Revoir has actually been kind of up and going for a couple of years. One of the principles of Emerging Civil War was to create some opportunities for the people who work with us. Like, let's use the brand to make opportunities for ourselves. So some of our historians actually had co-interest in Revolutionary War topics. And so we eventually did a spin-off called Emerging Revolutionary War, www.emergingrevolutionarywar.org. And so they've got their own kind of gig going over there. They've got a blog, free content. I think they've got 6 or 8 people writing for them right now. They had their first symposium last fall. They were supposed to have one coming up next month. That's been postponed. So they're, kind of got their own emerging history going as well.
Ah, nice. Yeah. First part of last year, I was at Washington Crossing, Trenton, and a number of places there, and some very interesting stuff going on.
Yeah. And my other area of interest is the political history of the founding. And so I'm a huge John Adams fan. I've got a bust of John Adams on my desk sitting over here. So I'm fascinated with that period as well. And so it's really been kind of cool to see Emerging Revoir make some of that history accessible. Again, trying to reach out to public audiences and share this very important story of the founding.
So are you planning an ERW conference?
They've got one scheduled. I guess now it's been postponed until May. They're doing it in conjunction with the city of Alexandria, held at one of their museums up there. And I think that their theme this year was it was supposed to be some clever wordplay on 2020 hindsight because of the year 2020. Can't quite remember what it was supposed to be. Bob Ortison and Phil Greenwalt are the two masterminds behind Emerging Revoir, and I can get them hooked up to talk with you at some point if you'd like. They're always glad to have somebody be interested in the Revoir. But they've really just done a great job. Phil was a historian out at George Washington birthplace for a long time, and so that kind of was why he was particularly interested in getting Emerging Revoir started.
Wow. So if somebody wants to sign up for the conference in 21, mm-hmm. how would they do that?
It's real easy. You can go to our website, www.emergingcivilwar.com. And on the right-hand side of the page, there's going to be a PayPal button where folks can sign up for the early bird rate. And that early bird rate lasts through December 31st. And then the full rate goes into effect. I think the early bird ticket's $155 and the regular price is $175. Covers 3 days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Keynote speaker, 10 speakers, and then usually on Sunday there's a tour. The tour for the next in-person symposium is going to be Greg Mertz, a historian with Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania National Military Park, who's going to take people on the ground where James Longstreet was wounded. The theme of that symposium is Fallen Leaders. And our keynote speaker is Gordon Ray, who's going to talk about the fall of Jeb Stuart at Yellow Tavern. So a lot of cool stuff, easy to sign up, and come hang out with us and have a good time.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. This has been a great time for me and probably for our viewers to find out more about you, about emerging Civil War, and the books and the plans and all that. So thank you very much.
Delighted. Thanks so much, Mike. Really appreciate your willingness to help us out and help spread the gospel of the Civil War.